Rivals of the Clouds *******, Rivals of the Clouds by Raoul Whitfield, author of Cloud Raiders, Clipped Wings etc. Frontispiece desperate, his plane afire, the German crashed into the rudder of Adams' ship. Zooming through a clinging, blinding fog, Lieutenant Adams flew straight into a death trap of flashing enemy planes and flaming, stuttering machine guns. This is an epic of the skies told by the ace of war writers. There was plenty of it, this grey, clinging fog. Drifting slowly down the slope just west of the tiny pursuit squadron field, clinging to the branches of the gaunt trees, then sweeping out over the field itself, the fog moved. It hung within 10 or 15 feet of the soft earth, and it was thick. Thick and cold. 20 minutes ago there hadn't been any sign of it, now the barracks could not be seen from the nearest camouflaged hangar. Lieutenant Ben Chapin came out of one end of the barracks and swore beneath his breath. It was almost 8 o'clock and 2 ships were out on the dawn patrol. They had been out since a few minutes after 6, and were due back any minute now. A figure, short and chunky, emerged from the white screen of the fog, moving toward the barracks, a clapboard building considerably the worse for wear. Ben Chapin hailed the figure. "Who's flying the dawn patrol, Adjutant?" "Adams and Cole." The short officer shook his head, pausing beyond the reaching wisps of white stuff. He spoke in a grim voice. "Adams and that new officer, Langdon," he stated. "Looks tough, eh?" Ben Chapin nodded. "Not so bad for Adams," he said slowly. "He'll have brains enough to fly back out of it, and land somewhere. But this Tex Langdon, the Lord knows what he'll do." The adjutant swore. "Wild riding birdman," he muttered. "But if he tries to come down in this stuff, he may finish up his career in a hurry." The adjutant vanished from sight into the narrow corridor of the barracks. He was hungry and cold, and not particularly concerned about Tex Langdon. Lieutenant Chapin stood out in the fog, and shook his head slowly. "Hope Tex does use his bean," he muttered. "Sort of like that officer. Acts like he's trying hard enough. But this'll be his first dose of," he checked himself. He was thinking of the clash after mess, last night, between Adams and Tex Langdon. It had been a sharp one. Lieutenant Adams was an old-timer, 3 weeks on the front. Tex had been up 3 days. In that time he had nosed over one ship, cracked another up 2 miles from the squadron, in a forced landing, and then he had taxied into a wingtip of Adams' pet Newport, just before mess. The old-timer had told him just about what he had thought. Tex had listened with a grin on his face, and the grin had enraged Lieutenant Adams. "You'll get yours in about 3 more days, Langdon," he had shot at him, and then, as Tex had kept right on smiling, Adams had gone the limit. And the sooner the better, for this outfit. Ben Chapin, standing out in the fog with his face tilted upward, swore grimly. Adams hadn't meant that. He'd been sore, the nervous strain was telling on him. And Tex had smiled that provocative smile of his. The big fellow was calm, or had been until that second. Then his eyes had narrowed to little slits. "Easy, Lieutenant," he had shot back coldly. "Where I come from that's right bad talk." And then Adams had laughed. It had been a nasty laugh. And when he had finished laughing he had shot more words at the big Texan. "You're not where you came from, unfortunately. But you'll get there, Lieutenant. The first Boche that gets on your tail will send you back to where you came from." Tex had got to his feet, after that. There had been no color in his face. Lieutenant Adams' meaning had been unmistakable. Ben Chapin had grabbed him, and the old-timer had turned his back and moved from the mess room. Lieutenant Chapin listened for the roar of a ship's engine, heard nothing but the distant rumble of guns, muffled by the fog. Staff had pulled a boner in picking the locality of the 16th Pursuit's field. Every 5 or 6 days the ground fog was so bad that ships didn't get in. Once or twice they hadn't been able to get off. The pilot turned back toward the barracks. He shook his head slowly. Somewhere in the sky, winging back toward the squadron, most probably, were Lieutenants Adams and Tex Langdon. Quite often 2 pilots, one winging in from the north and the other from the south patrol of the front, would meet over Chalbrook, fly back to the squadron together. Perfectly synchronized wristwatches helped such a meet in the air. Lieutenant Adams was an old-timer. He knew about fog, knew where it was likely to hang and where the ground might be clear. If the 2 ships met, he could guide Tex Langdon in. He could, but would he? Ben Chapin swore again. He shook his head. It looked like a tough break for Tex. One more smash and he'd go back toward Blois. The squadron needed ships too badly. And now there was fog, heavy fog. And the only pilot who could help Tex was Lieutenant Adams. Ben Chapin's lips moved slowly as he moved along the corridor toward his tiny coupe. "If Tex rides this one into the corral," he muttered grimly, "he's good. More than good, I'll say, he's perfect." 9 miles east of the 16th Pursuit Squadron's fog-shrouded field, 10,000 feet above the front lines, 2 ships zoomed and dove, twisted and spun in the sky. The 2 ships had been engaged in combat for more than 3 minutes, and the battle was a tough one. One plane was a baby albatross, very well camouflaged. The other was a 15-meter Nieuport, not so well camouflaged. In the narrow cockpit of the Nieuport was Lieutenant Tex Langdon. His blue eyes were rimmed with red, his lips were pressed tightly together as he handled the American ship, trying to get in position for a machine gun burst at the enemy plane. The German pilot was a fine flyer. Twice he had almost sent streams of tracer-marked lead into the fuselage of the American ship. The left wing surfaces showed the bullet holes of his last hit, and it was much too close for comfort. But Tex Langdon was fighting on and fighting desperately. 2 things worried him. He was running low in gas, and the damaged wing surfaces might be badly weakened. The Bosch pilot had come down out of the clouds, almost taking him by surprise, as he was winging back toward the 16th. Tex had kicked the Nieuport into a tailspin, and on coming out of it the German lead had punctured his wing fabric. Since then the fight had been sharp. The air was bad, the earth below was obscured by drifting fog. The patrol had not been a particularly successful one, and now the attack of the German pilot threatened to make it disastrous. Tex had the feeling that he was too green for the enemy pilot. The Nieuport came up in a zoom. For a flashing second he had the albatross in the ring sight of the Browning. He squeezed the stick trigger of the propeller-synchronized weapon, then released pressure after a short burst. He saw that his stream was behind the slanting enemy ship, then he lost the plane in a blind spot of his own ship. He nosed downward and caught the flash of a shape coming up at the Nieuport, then went over in a vertical bank. Green-yellow tracer bullet fire streaked through the sky close to the plane. Once again the German pilot had come very close to scoring a hit. Tex Langdon's lean face twisted. The patrol had been a long one, a difficult one. He was new to such flying. The German pilot was more experienced. The Nieuport's gun was getting low. There was the fog hanging close to the earth. It might mean that he would have to search for the squadron field. The Albatross was a quarter-mile away, between the Nieuport and the Allied rear lines, and banking. Her pilot banked, came out of it, zoomed for altitude. Tex Langdon wiped his goggle glass clear of a splatter of oil, nosed down to gain speed, and banked his own ship. He could not afford to let the other pilot get altitude. His lips moved as he squinted blue eyes on the enemy ship. Get sense, show tail and fly out of it. If I don't, he'll get me. It was the way he felt. He was fighting a losing combat. He was new at the front. There was justification for a sky retreat. Just one thing stopped him from winging out. One human, Lieutenant Adams. He would make his report and Adams would learn about it. There were few secrets in the outfit, he had learned that already. Adams would know that he had run away from an enemy pilot. He shook his head. The Albatross was streaking in at the Nieuport now. Their altitudes were about the same, both had leveled off from zooms. But now the German pilot zoomed again. And then, as Tex pulled back on the stick of the Nieuport, he came out of the zoom and dove. The American pilot shoved his stick forward, to dive the Nieuport. He saw the nose of the tiny Albatross come up, knew that the enemy pilot had tried again to get beneath his plane for a shot upward. Both planes were streaking at each other now. Tex squeezed the stick trigger. The crackle of machine gun fire sounded, then died abruptly. But his fingers were still squeezing the trigger. The gun had jammed. Air battle. The German brought his plane up despite the odds, and then Tex's gun chattered. Tex Langdon groaned, banked to the right. A strut leaped, out on the left wing. Fabric ripped, the tracer stream of the other ship was tearing through wing and wood. A shape flashed up past the vertical banked Newport. Tex Langdon twisted his neck, got a glimpse of the German pilot's head. The two ships rushed past each other. Once again Tex felt the desire to wing for it. He had plenty of reason now. His wing fabric was badly damaged, a strut had been splintered. And yet, something within him refused the chance. He swore hoarsely, banked around, leveled off. His eyes widened. Slanting down toward Earth, flames streaking up from her, was the Albatross. She was an eighth of a mile distant, and for a second he thought that his short burst, before the gun had jammed, had done the trick. And then he saw the other plane. She was banking around, and evidently had just come out of a dive. She was a Newport, and bore the markings of the 16th Squadron on her camouflaged fuselage. Tex stiffened in the cockpit. He forgot about the damaged wing fabric, the splintered strut. Lieutenant Adams, flying the Dawn Patrol. Adams had shot down the enemy with whom he had been combating. His Newport was roaring toward the other ship. He cut down the throttle speed. Lieutenant Adams was dropping down toward Earth, toward the ground fog. At intervals, as Tex followed him down in a mild glide, he could see the other lieutenant's ship spurt a trail of smoke from her exhaust. The ship was all right, Adams was keeping the gas feed steady. The German plane crashed between the lines, in a great burst of flame. Black smoke rolled up from her. And Lieutenant Adams was leveling off now, he was heading back toward the squadron. He was ignoring Tex, just as though he had never been in the air. Even as the pilot of the damaged ship tried to level off and wing after the other Newport, fog swept over Lieutenant Adams' plane. She was lost from sight. Rage struck at Tex Langdon. His Newport was heading back toward the 16th, but the whole sector was covered with fog. Lieutenant Adams knew that. The veteran pilot knew that Tex would have trouble finding the squadron. He must have guessed that gas was running low. And yet he winged away from the other Newport, roared his ship into the ground fog. Tex Langdon swore grimly. He roared the engine into full voice and the Newport rushed into the white blanket of fog. The beat of the engine increased in tone, magnified by the density of the atmosphere. Tex could barely see the wingtips of his ship, his goggle glass clouded instantly. He felt that he was flying with a wing droop, and there was no level gauge in his baby plane. He pulled back on the stick. It was either that or risk going into a spin. He couldn't drop down very low to the earth, as perhaps Lieutenant Adams was doing. He didn't know the country well enough. There were hills about the sector, he might pile into one. Adams could fly by time and his sense of direction. He knew I couldn't make it, he muttered. Not without his help. And he pulled out on me. The engine spluttered, picked up again, spluttered once more. Tex Langdon worked over the air and gas adjustment, his heart pounding. Then, abruptly, as he nosed the ship forward, the engine died. Tex Langdon was suddenly very cool. He banked the ship to the westward, got her into a gentle glide, stretching it as much as he could. He cut the ignition switch. The Newport glided downward, her wires shrilling softly, the fabric of the left wing surfaces crackling in the glide wind. The fog enveloped her. The altimeter was not registering at the low altitude. He guessed that the ship was within 50 or 75 feet of the earth. He pulled back slightly on the stick, the nose of the Newport came up. There was a blur of dark color stabbing up through the gray stuff. Savagely he wiped the glass of his goggles for the last time and stared ahead, downward. Something long and curved stabbed at the right wing. He saw other blurs of color, fog clinging to them, rise up before him. He jerked the stick back against his flying overalls, the nose came up. And then the ship twisted violently to one side. Fabric ripped. He threw both arms before his face, releasing his grip on the stick. The weight of the Hispano-Suiza engine carried the Newport down through the upper branches of the trees. And only the fact that Tex Langdon had stalled, just before the plane struck into them, saved him. As it was, a twisting, battering branch shot through the fuselage fabric, ripping the overall material and sending a stabbing pain up his right leg. Then the plane was motionless, and Tex Langdon snapped the safety belt buckle loose, slid carefully out of the cockpit. The splintered prop was in the soggy earth beneath the trees through which the ship had plunged, but it had not battered in deeply. Off to the right, as Tex dropped to earth and limped about, sounded the steady firing of a battery. Tex Langdon smiled grimly. The ship was a wreck. Lieutenant Adams had dropped down from the skies and had got himself the Boche with whom Tex had been battling so desperately. Then he had winged on back, through the fog. It had been as though Tex and his plane had not existed. The tall Westerner shook his head slowly. It would probably mean Blois for him, though the bullet holes in the wing surfaces might help his case. He'd get over to the battery, get directions back to his squadron. And there was one officer with whom he wished to talk, back at the 16th. He wouldn't have much to say, but he'd say it in his own, particular way. He took a last look at the Newport, limped toward the sound of the firing. The battery would be fairly close to the front, and that meant a long trip back to the outfit. He had been lucky, perhaps, to escape as he had, in the landing. But there was no thanks to Lieutenant Adams, not for that. Tex Langdon limped slowly onward. The woods ended abruptly, he was on soggy ground. In the distance there was the flash of red, spreading strangely through the white-gray fog. It was cold. All about him guns rumbled. But he didn't feel the cold, and scarcely noticed the rumble of the guns. He was thinking about Lieutenant Adams, and getting back to the squadron. Captain Louis Jones spoke across the crew desk between his short form and the tall one of Lieutenant Langdon. You haven't had the experience of Lieutenant Adams, and it was your first combat. You should have flown out before your gas got so low. Lieutenant Adams tells me that it looked as though you were in trouble. He says he dropped on your Bosch and got him. He hasn't any verification because the ship fell between the lines, and there was a lot of fog, though not where the albatross fell. Perhaps you will verify his shoot down. Tex Langdon nodded. There was a grim smile on his face. I will, Captain, he stated. He got the albatross, all right. Got back here without any trouble, they tell me. The squadron CO nodded. Went around to the west, slipped under the fog and came in just off the earth. Of course, he knew. The captain frowned and changed the subject. We expect 2 new ships down from Calumi before dusk, if the fog lifts. You'll draw one of them. We'll try to salvage your old ship. Tomorrow morning you can stay back of the lines, working on your new gun and feeling out the ship. I'm not exactly praising your work, Lieutenant. Get that straight. But you had a bad ground fog. Bad enough to give you another crack at the front. This time, he shrugged his shoulders, smiling at Tex Langdon. The lieutenant nodded. I understand, Captain, he stated. I've cracked up a lot of ships in a short time. But I've been trying, the CO smiled slightly. That helps, but it isn't the whole thing, Lieutenant, he stated. I know you're trying. It isn't enough. You've got to succeed. Won't always have Lieutenant Adams around to pull you out of scrapes, you know. Tex felt rage strike at him. But he controlled his feelings with an effort. Adams, getting him out of a scrape. The CO nodded dismissal. Tex Langdon went from the captain's office toward his own coupe. It was almost 4 o'clock. It had taken him 5 hours to reach the squadron from Battery H4. He was about to turn into the barracks when he almost collided with Lieutenant Adams. That officer muttered something, turned to one side. Tex caught him by the arm. Just a second, please, Lieutenant. CO tells me you got me out of a jam, this morning. Adams narrowed dark eyes on the blue ones of the Texan. He nodded, standing fully a head shorter than Tex. Well, didn't I, Lieutenant, he snapped. Sorry I couldn't fly both ships, might have kept you out of another. I'm not saying you didn't get me out of a sky jam, Adams Tex replied in a quiet tone. But I am saying this, you didn't know you were getting me out of one. The other pilot stiffened. His eyes narrowed on Tex Langdon's blue ones. Come again, he snapped. Make that more clear. Tex nodded. The CO asked me to verify your shoot down, Adams. I did. But get this straight. You saw me skyscraping with a Bosch. You had ceiling, and a chance to drop in. You did, and you got my Bosch. You didn't know I was running low in gas, or that I'd been hit twice by the enemy's lead. And if you had known, it wouldn't have made any difference. You got the German ship for your record. And you winged straight for the squadron, not giving a damn about me." Lieutenant Adams smiled grimly. "Think so, Langdon?" he asked quietly. "I know so." Tex snapped back. "I mussed up your pet ship in a takeoff, and I didn't get on my knees when you howled about it. You're sore. You knew I couldn't find the squadron in the fog, and you left me to go where you've said I came from." There was a little silence. Then Lieutenant Adams spoke. His voice was like ice. "You couldn't have followed me through that fog, Langdon," he stated. "Because you can't handle a ship in the sky. Is that any reason that I should mess my chance up? My Newport was running low in gas, too. I wasn't sure of finding the outfit. And I dropped on that Boche because he was outmaneuvering you. I sat up in the sky and watched you. You never even saw me there." Tex stared at the other lieutenant. Then he laughed nastily. "You may get in a sky jam sometime," he said slowly. "You might even crack up a ship one of these days. And if I'm around," Lieutenant Adams swore sharply. His face twisted. "You won't be," he snapped. "I'll be shooting lead around the front when you're—" He broke off, controlling himself. Tex Langdon smiled at him, his eyes narrowed. When he spoke, his voice was very low and steady. "When I'm back where I came from, Lieutenant. Maybe you're right, Adams. But I'm not forgetting that you winged out on me, into the grey stuff. The captain didn't ask me to verify that fact." The veteran smiled grimly. "If I ever get in a sky jam, Langdon," he said slowly, "I won't expect any help from you. If you did try to help, you'd probably crash me in the air. It's about the only thing you haven't done since you've been up." Lieutenant Tex Langdon nodded. "Just about," he agreed in a peculiar tone. "Except, I haven't quit a man in ground fog." The 2 replacement ships didn't come in that afternoon. Nor the next afternoon. The fog continued to hang low and thick. Most of the pilots sat on the ground, worked on their ships, lined up guns. One morning of the 3rd day the fog lifted a bit and the 2 replacement Newports were ferried in from Columbia. Lieutenant Scaffer drew one and Tex Langdon drew the other. Tex worked over his Browning, got the ship off for an hour's hop back of the lines before dark. She handled well, and in a couple of bursts at the ground target south of the 16th field he didn't do so bad. But he almost cracked up setting her down, making a fast landing. He taxied her into one of the camouflaged hangars, gave the ground crew sergeant his okay, and moved toward his coupe in the barracks. An orderly was waiting for him. He was wanted at the COS office. He washed up, hurried over. Captain Jones frowned up at him. "Lieutenant Connors reports sick. Looks like a touch of flu. We're short pilots, and brigade is howling for defense planes. Enemy ships are flooding the sector air. Is your new ship all right? Yes, Sir, Tex replied quietly. Take her over until dark, the CO ordered. Lieutenants Harrington and Adams are out. Head for Hill G.8. Some Fokkers are raising the devil up that way. The French may get some ships across, and you might help some in a dogfight. Pull back here before dark. That's all. Get me a report as soon as you get in. Tex nodded, saluted. He went to his barracks, got his helmet and goggles, headed for the Newport again. The ground crew pulled her out. Adams across the line. Tex smiled grimly. That lieutenant was getting plenty of work. So were they all, for that matter. He climbed into the cockpit, revved up the little ship's engine for a few minutes, nodded his head for the blocks to be pulled away. The pursuit plane rolled out across the soggy field, climbed into the sky. Tex headed straight for the front. As the Newport gained altitude, he stared over the side. From the northeast, clinging low to the ground, white fog was drifting. Tex Langdon groaned. For a brief second he thought of banking around, turning back. The CO was not pleased with his work. And he was winging toward the front with darkness and fog coming to obscure the squadron field. If he cracked up again, well, orders were orders. The Newport climbed steadily. He banked slightly toward the north, toward Hill G.8. The fog was not yet thick, but it would grow thick. There was little wind. The beat of the hissoo was steady in his ears. It took the plane 11 minutes and some odd seconds to reach the hill. The fog around the rise was slight. It was much thicker back of the ship, back toward the squadron. There were two ships in the sky, to the east, on the German side of the lines. They were winging toward Allied territory and were flying much higher than the altitude of the Newport. Tex searched the sky with his eyes, climbed the Newport. He saw no other planes. The American ship had reached an altitude of 12,000 feet. He guessed that the other two planes were flying just beneath the clouds, at about 15,000. There was no sun, and darkness was not far away. At 13,000 feet he leveled off. The two ships heading toward the Allied lines had suddenly peaked. They were diving at his ship, but then he saw that he was mistaken. Across the lines, winging back toward the Allied side, was a tiny plane. She was flying with a wing droop, and it was upon her that the two other planes were dropping. Tex dove the Newport. She slanted down across the lines, her nose pointed toward German territory. He could distinguish the other two diving ships now. They were both Fokkers of the fighting type. The plane below, he guessed, was an Allied ship, trying to get back across the lines. That ship was almost over the lines, and the German pilots had stretched their drive, thus allowing Tex to gain on them. He was within 100 yards of the nearest enemy ship before the pilot saw him. Instantly the enemy zoomed. Tex, lips pressed tightly together, pulled back slightly on the stick. The Fokker's zoom failed. A long burst of lead from Tex's Browning streamed down into the cockpit of the enemy plane. As Tex pulled all the way back on the stick, zooming and then going over on a wing, he saw the second Fokker cease to dive on the ship below. He pulled the Newport around in a vertical bank, stared over the side. The Fokker on which he had come down was dropping in an uncontrolled spin. The pilot had been hit. The other Fokker was trying to get altitude, but her pilot had been forced to pull her over level, after her first zoom. Tex leveled out of the bank, dove on her with engine half on. She dove instantly and he saw that she was going down after the wing-drooping plane below. That plane, he saw now, was a Newport. And a 16th Squadron Newport. The Fokker gained rapidly on the crippled American plane. Tex dove with engine power adding speed. The Fokker swept down behind and slightly below the Newport, then zoomed, leaving a tracer stream in the sky, slanting back of the wing-drooping ship. Again her pilot had missed by a narrow margin. But this time the German pilot pulled his ship up and over, and at the peak of the zoom, as she was on her back, he did a nice Immelmann. In a flash the Fokker had righted herself. Less than 50 yards of air separated her from Tex's Newport now, both guns spat streams of lead at the same second. The German pilot's lead was low. It passed beneath the undergear of the Newport. Tex zoomed as the enemy shape flashed close. Flames were shooting up from the engine of the German ship. But she zoomed, too. The Newport jerked sickeningly. The controls were loose in Tex's grip. The Fokker pilot, knowing he was finished, had rammed the Newport from below, striking the tail assembly with a wingtip. Tex Langdon felt the Newport go into a side slip. He tried to get her out of it, failed. She was slipping off on her right wing, toward the brown-gray line of the earth, almost 1,000 feet below. He jerked his head. The second Fokker was going down in a straight nose dive, flames shooting back from her. And toward the ground fog to the westward winged the crippled Newport that he had saved from the two enemy planes. Wind tore at Tex Langdon's helmet. He moved the stick to the right, expecting to feel no pressure, believing that the tail assembly had been carried away in the crash. But there was pressure. He kicked right rudder. The slip ceased, but the Newport was now diving at terrific speed, less than 500 feet from the earth. Slowly he pulled back on the stick. He cut the throttle speed down, held his breath. And slowly the nose of the Newport came up. The tail assembly was still sticking in place, although the ship answered sluggishly. He advanced the throttle to 3/4 speed. The plane was headed toward the squadron. She was flying less than 300 feet above the earth, and there could be no maneuvering now. The Newport would have to be flown level, carefully. The slightest piece of over-controlling might rip the damaged tail assembly from the fuselage. Tex Langdon stared ahead, down. He groaned. He had forgotten the ground fog. It was spread over the earth, in the direction of the squadron, like a grey-white blanket. Even below the ship now, the first wisps of it were drifting. And far ahead was the wing-drooping Newport, vanishing from sight into the grey stuff. Tex stiffened in the cockpit. Lieutenant Adams, once more winging away from his plane in the fog. He couldn't be sure of it, but he could guess. He had saved Adams from going down with Bosch lead in his plane and body, and the lieutenant again was winging in to leave him alone. Even with a drooping wing, he might have waited. Lieutenant Harrington would have waited. It was Adams, all right. He reached for the throttle, but then he muttered to himself suddenly. The Newport that had vanished into the fog was in sight again. She was banking around, coming back. Tex held the little combat ship in level flight. He watched the other plane come on, his eyes wide. Her left wing drooped badly, she had banked around to the right. He caught sight of a helmeted head, an arm held out in the prop wash. The two ships rushed past each other. Tex stared back. Once again the Newport was banking to the right. She came around sluggishly, gained slowly on the throttled down sister plane. Side by side, with less than 20 feet of grey air between the wingtips, they flew now. And Tex recognized Lieutenant Adams. That officer was pointing toward his left wingtip, which was in tatters toward the trailing edge, with one strut twisting back in the wind. The officer got a hand out in the prop wash, tilted it downward in a mild degree. Tex nodded. He pointed back toward his ship's tail assembly, saw Lieutenant Adams twist his head, stare back. And then the veteran lieutenant nodded his head and banked slightly to the southward. Tex banked, too, very gently. The other Newport was nosing downward now, and Tex moved the stick forward a bit. The movements of his plane were very sluggish, uncertain. Fog swept over both planes. Tex flew with his head half turned, watching the wingtips of the other ship. Several times they were lost from sight, but each time he picked them up again. Both ships were flying throttled down. Seconds passed and they seemed hours. The fog was growing thicker. And then, very suddenly, the fog cleared. A slope seemed to rise out of it. Lieutenant Adams banked sharply away from Tex's Newport. His plane's nose came down. Tex banked his plane, cut the throttle. Below was a fairly level field with very little fog on it. Even as the Newport glided downward, he saw the wheels and tail skid of the other officer's ship strike. And then he was stalling the tail-damaged ship. He was within 10 feet of the earth when something snapped under the strain. The nose whipped downward. There was a grinding crash as the prop splintered into the earth. Tex tried to protect his head but failed. Something battered him backward. There was a flash of yellow light and then everything went black. Tex Langdon recovered consciousness slowly. His head ached. He raised a hand to bandages wound about it. Slowly he blinked the dizziness away from his eyes, wet his oil-stained lips with the tip of his tongue. He looked around. He was propped up against the wreckage of a plane. There were khaki-clad figures moving in the mud of a field, against a background of drifting fog. He turned his head slightly. The eyes of Lieutenant Adams smiled at him. "Feel rotten, eh? But you do feel. That's something." Lieutenant Tex Langdon managed a painful grin. It was more than something, he thought, it was everything. His blue eyes narrowed on Lieutenant Adams' dark ones. "You came back," he muttered thickly. "You got me down here," Adams grunted. "Didn't quite do that, Tex," he stated grimly. "That tail assembly of yours collapsed before you set her down. Figured this lope would have less fog and headed for it." "You came back," Tex persisted. "After you winged into the white stuff." Lieutenant Adams swore softly. "You and I, Lieutenant, we've been acting up," he said slowly. "You may crack up your own ships, but you cracked up 2 other ships, today. And you saved my neck. I couldn't wing out on you, Tex. Figured I might be able to bank around, without the droop getting me into a slip. It was pretty rotten, winging out on you. Didn't know, though, that you had a crippled ship." Tex grinned feebly. "It was damn white, after what I've said to you, Adams," he said slowly. "We've both been pretty thick." He fumbled for a cigarette, found 2. Adams lighted them up. They inhaled appreciatively. "Pretty thick," Lieutenant Adams was agreeing. "Sort of like." He stopped, grinned broadly. Tex nodded. He raised his eyes slightly. "Like the ground fog, Adams," he muttered. He closed his eyes. "But we got out of it." And Lieutenant Adams, smiling grimly, nodded his head. "We cleared up, Tex," he muttered, "just about in time." Transcriber's note: this story appeared in the January 1929 issue of XXX magazine. End of the Project Gutenberg ebook Rivals of the Clouds Updated editions will replace the previous one, the old editions will be renamed. Creating the works from print editions not protected by U.S. copyright law means that no one owns a United States copyright in these works, so the Foundation, and you, can copy and distribute it in the United States without permission and without paying copyright royalties. Special rules, set forth in the general terms of use part of this license, apply to copying and distributing Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works to protect the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol concept and trademark. Project Gutenberg is a registered trademark, and may not be used if you charge for an ebook, except by following the terms of the trademark license, including paying royalties for use of the Project Gutenberg trademark. If you do not charge anything for copies of this ebook, complying with the trademark license is very easy. You may use this ebook for nearly any purpose, such as creation of derivative works, reports, performances and research. Project Gutenberg ebooks may be modified and printed and given away, You may do practically anything in the United States with ebooks not protected by U.S. copyright law. Redistribution is subject to the trademark license, especially commercial redistribution. Start. Full license. The full Project Gutenberg license. Please read this before you distribute or use this work to protect the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol mission of promoting the free distribution of electronic works. By using or distributing this work, or any other work associated in any way with the phrase Project Gutenberg, you agree to comply with all the terms of the full Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license available with this file or online at www.gutenberg.org/license. Section 1. General Terms of Use and Redistributing Project Gutenberg Trademark Symbol Electronic Works 1.0. By reading or using any part of this Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic work, you indicate that you have read, understand, agree to and accept all the terms of this license and intellectual property, trademark/copyright, agreement. If you do not agree to abide by all the terms of this agreement, you must cease using and return or destroy all copies of Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works in your possession. If you paid a fee for obtaining a copy of or access to a Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic work and you do not agree to be bound by the terms of this agreement, you may obtain a refund from the person or entity to whom you paid the fee as set forth in paragraph 1.e.8. 1.b Project Gutenberg is a registered trademark. It may only be used on or associated in any way with an electronic work by people who agree to be bound by the terms of this agreement. There are a few things that you can do with most Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works even without complying with the full terms of this agreement. See paragraph 1.c below. There are a lot of things you can do with Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works if you follow the terms of this agreement and help preserve free future access to Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works. See paragraph 1.e below. 1.c. The Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation, the Foundation or PGLAF, owns a compilation copyright in the collection of Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works. Nearly all the individual works in the collection are in the public domain in the United States. If an individual work is unprotected by copyright law in the United States and you are located in the United States, we do not claim a right to prevent you from copying, distributing, performing, displaying or creating derivative works based on the work as long as all references to Project Gutenberg are removed. Of course, we hope that you will support the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol mission of promoting free access to electronic works by freely sharing Project Gutenberg trademark symbol works in compliance with the terms of this agreement for keeping the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol name associated with the work. You can easily comply with the terms of this agreement by keeping this work in the same format with its attached full Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license when you share it without charge with others. 1.d. The copyright laws of the place where you are located also govern what you can do with this work. Copyright laws in most countries are in a constant state of change. If you are outside the United States, check the laws of your country in addition to the terms of this agreement before downloading, copying, displaying, performing, distributing or creating derivative works based on this work or any other Project Gutenberg trademark symbol work. The Foundation makes no representations concerning the copyright status of any work in any country other than the United States. 1.e Unless you have removed all references to Project Gutenberg, 1.e.1. The following sentence, with active links to, or other immediate access to, the full Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license must appear prominently whenever any copy of a Project Gutenberg trademark symbol work, any work on which the phrase Project Gutenberg appears, or with which the phrase Project Gutenberg is associated, is accessed, displayed, performed, viewed, copied or distributed. This ebook is for the use of anyone anywhere in the United States and most other parts of the world at no cost and with almost no restrictions whatsoever. You may copy it, give it away or reuse it under the terms of the Project Gutenberg license included with this ebook or online at www.gutenberg.org. If you are not located in the United States, you will have to check the laws of the country where you are located before using this ebook. 1.e.2. If an individual Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic work is derived from texts not protected by U.S. copyright law, does not contain a notice indicating that it is posted with permission of the copyright holder, the work can be copied and distributed to anyone in the United States without paying any fees or charges. If you are redistributing or providing access to a work with the phrase Project Gutenberg associated with or appearing on the work, you must comply either with the requirements of paragraphs 1.e.1 through 1.e.7 or obtain permission for the use of the work and the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol trademark as set forth in paragraphs 1.e.8 or 1.e.9. 1.e.3. If an individual Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic work is posted with the permission of the copyright holder, your use and distribution must comply with both paragraphs 1.e.1 through 1.e.7 and any additional terms imposed by the copyright holder. Additional terms will be linked to the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license for all works posted with the permission of the copyright holder found at the beginning of this work. 1.e.4. Do not unlink or detach or remove the full Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license terms from this work, or any files containing a part of this work or any other work associated with Project Gutenberg trademark symbol. 1.e.5. Do not copy, display, perform, distribute or redistribute this electronic work, or any part of this electronic work, without prominently displaying the sentence set forth in paragraph 1.e.1 with active links or immediate access to the full terms of the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license. 1.e.6. You may convert to and distribute this work in any binary, compressed, marked up, non-proprietary or proprietary form, including any word processing or hypertext form. However, if you provide access to or distribute copies of a Project Gutenberg trademark symbol work in a format other than plain vanilla ASCII or other format used in the official version posted on the official Project Gutenberg trademark symbol website, www.gutenberg.org, you must, at no additional cost, fee or expense to the user, provide a copy, a means of exporting a copy, or a means of obtaining a copy upon request, of the work in its original plain vanilla ASCII or other form. Any alternate format must include the full Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license as specified in paragraph 1.e.1. 1.e.7. Do not charge a fee for access to, viewing, displaying, performing, copying or distributing any Project Gutenberg trademark symbol works unless you comply with paragraph 1.e.8 or 1.e.9. 1.e.8. You may charge a reasonable fee for copies of or providing access to or distributing Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works provided that you pay a royalty fee of 20% of the gross profits you derive from the use of Project Gutenberg trademark symbol works calculated using the method you already use to calculate your applicable taxes. The fee is owed to the owner of the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol trademark, but he has agreed to donate royalties under this paragraph to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation. Royalty payments must be paid within 60 days following each date on which you prepare, or are legally required to prepare, your periodic tax returns. Royalty payments should be clearly marked as such and sent to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation at the address specified in Section 4, Information about donations to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation. You provide a full refund of any money paid by a user who notifies you in writing, or by email, within 30 days of receipt that he does not agree to the terms of the full Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license. You must require such a user to return or destroy all copies of the works possessed in a physical medium and discontinue all use of and all access to other copies of Project Gutenberg trademark symbol works. You provide, in accordance with paragraph 1.f.3, a full refund of any money paid for a work or a replacement copy, if a defect in the electronic work is discovered and reported to you within 90 days of receipt of the work. You comply with all other terms of this agreement for free distribution of Project Gutenberg trademark symbol works. 1.e.9. If you wish to charge a fee or distribute a Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic work or group of works on different terms than are set forth in this agreement, you must obtain permission in writing from the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation, the manager of the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol trademark. Contact the Foundation as set forth in Section 3 below. 1.f1.f.1. Project Gutenberg volunteers and employees expend considerable effort to identify, do copyright research on, transcribe and proofread works not protected by U.S. copyright law in creating the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol collection. Despite these efforts, Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works, and the medium on which they may be stored, may contain defects such as, but not limited to, incomplete, inaccurate or corrupt data, transcription errors, a copyright or other intellectual property infringement, a defective or damaged disk or other medium, a computer virus, or computer codes that damage or cannot be read by your equipment. 1.f.2 Limited warranty, disclaimer of damages, except for the right of replacement or refund described in paragraph 1.f.3. The Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation, the owner of the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol trademark, and any other party distributing a Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic work under this agreement, disclaim all liability to you for damages, costs and expenses, including legal fees. You agree that you have no remedies for negligence, strict liability, breach of warranty or breach of contract except those provided in paragraph 1.f.3. You agree that the Foundation, the trademark owner, and any distributor under this agreement will not be liable to you for actual, direct, indirect, consequential, punitive or incidental damages even if you give notice of the possibility of such damage. 1.f.3 Limited right of replacement or refund. If you discover a defect in this electronic work within 90 days of receiving it, you can receive a refund of the money, if any, you paid for it by sending a written explanation to the person you received the work from. If you received the work on a physical medium, you must return the medium with your written explanation. The person or entity that provided you with the defective work may elect to provide a replacement copy in lieu of a refund. If you received the work electronically, the person or entity providing it to you may choose to give you a second opportunity to receive the work electronically in lieu of a refund. If the second copy is also defective, you may demand a refund in writing without further opportunities to fix the problem. 1.f.4 Except for the limited right of replacement or refund set forth in paragraph 1.f.3, this work is provided to you as is, with no other warranties of any kind, express or implied, including but not limited to warranties of merchantability or fitness for any purpose. 1.f.5 Some states do not allow disclaimers of certain implied warranties or the exclusion or limitation of certain types of damages. If any disclaimer or limitation set forth in this agreement violates the law of the state applicable to this agreement, the agreement shall be interpreted to make the maximum disclaimer or limitation permitted by the applicable state law. The invalidity or unenforceability of any provision of this agreement shall not void the remaining provisions. 1.f.6 Indemnity. You agree to indemnify and hold the Foundation, the trademark owner, any agent or employee of the Foundation, anyone providing copies of Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works in accordance with this agreement, and any volunteers associated with the production, promotion and distribution of Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works, harmless from all liability, costs and expenses, including legal fees, that arise directly or indirectly from any of the following which you do or cause to occur. A. Distribution of this or any Project Gutenberg trademark symbol work. B. Alteration, modification, or additions or deletions to any Project Gutenberg trademark symbol work, and C. Any defect you cause. Section 2. Information about the mission of Project Gutenberg trademark symbol. Project Gutenberg trademark symbol is synonymous with the free distribution of electronic works in formats readable by the widest variety of computers, including obsolete, old, middle-aged and new computers. It exists because of the efforts of hundreds of volunteers and donations from people in all walks of life. Volunteers and financial support to provide volunteers with the assistance they need are critical to reaching Project Gutenberg trademark symbol's goals and ensuring that the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol collection will remain freely available for generations to come. In 2001, the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation was created to provide a secure and permanent future for Project Gutenberg trademark symbol and future generations. To learn more about the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation and how your efforts and donations can help, see sections 3 and 4 and the Foundation information page at www.gutenberg.org. Section 3. Information about the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation. The Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation is a non-profit 501(c)(3) educational corporation organized under the laws of the state of Mississippi and granted tax-exempt status by the Internal Revenue Service. The Foundation's IN or Federal Tax Identification Number is 64-6221541. Contributions to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation are tax-deductible to the full extent permitted by U.S. federal laws and your state's laws. The Foundation's business office is located at 809 North 1500 West, Salt Lake City, UT 84116, 801-596-1887. Email contact links and up-to-date contact information can be found at the Foundation's website and official page at www.gutenberg.org/contact section 4. Information about donations to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation. Project Gutenberg trademark symbol depends upon and cannot survive without widespread public support and donations to carry out its mission of increasing the number of public domain and licensed works that can be freely distributed in machine-readable form accessible by the widest array of equipment, including outdated equipment. Many small donations, $1 to $5,000, are particularly important to maintaining tax-exempt status with the IRS. The Foundation is committed to complying with the laws regulating charities and charitable donations in all 50 states of the United States. Compliance requirements are not uniform and it takes a considerable effort, much paperwork and many fees to meet and keep up with these requirements. We do not solicit donations in locations where we have not received written confirmation of compliance. To send donations or determine the status of compliance for any particular state, visit www.gutenberg.org/donate. While we cannot and do not solicit contributions from states where we have not met the solicitation requirements, we know of no prohibition against accepting unsolicited donations from donors in such states who approach us with offers to donate. International donations are gratefully accepted, but we cannot make any statements concerning tax treatment of donations received from outside the United States. U.S. laws alone swamp our small staff. Please check the Project Gutenberg web pages for current donation methods and addresses. Donations are accepted in a number of other ways, including checks, online payments and credit card donations. To donate, please visit www.gutenberg.org/donate. Section 5. General information about Project Gutenberg Trademark Symbol Electronic Works. Professor Michael S. Hart was the originator of the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol concept of a library of electronic works that could be freely shared with anyone. For 40 years, he produced and distributed Project Gutenberg trademark symbol ebooks with only a loose network of volunteer support. Project Gutenberg trademark symbol ebooks are often created from several printed editions, all of which are confirmed as not protected by copyright in the US unless a copyright notice is included. Thus, we do not necessarily keep ebooks in compliance with any particular paper edition. Most people start at our website, which has the main PG search facility, www.gutenberg.org. This website includes information about Project Gutenberg trademark symbol, including how to make donations to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation, how to help produce our new ebooks, and how to subscribe to our email newsletter to hear about new ebooks.